I think Wall Street's been missing a lot about what's going on with streaming, particularly as it relates to the traditional media companies and the transition they're making. Been way too much focus on the number of subs. Now there's a huge amount of focus on profitability of the streaming business. Obviously, both of those are important elements of whether a streaming business is going to be successful. But they're not putting enough weight on the deterioration of the traditional business. And the traditional business, because of cord cutting, because of losing audience, because of the impact of that on what was the best media model ever known to man, where it didn't matter how many people were watching your service relative to how much you were getting paid in fees by cable or satellite operators. You got paid across every home, even if a small fraction of homes were watching you. The loss of the best media model going to a much tougher media model where lower margins, in some cases lower subscriber revenue, advertising revenue, which on a per sub basis has yet to be proven in terms of its strength. I think there's a lot of deterioration in the traditional business that is going to bog these traditional media companies down, which hasn't been paid enough attention to by Wall Street analysts generally. Well, one, Netflix is in its own lane because it doesn't have a traditional business that it has to balance and worry about how to deal with its deterioration. Two, the other traditional media companies, one, because of the deterioration in their traditional business, and two, because of the Wall Street focus on getting to profitability as quickly on their streaming business. Netflix isn't cutting back in the same way that traditional media companies are. Cutting your way to growth is very, very tough. And Netflix really is not having to do that in the same way that the traditional media companies are looking to do. And so it has a bit of a moat. It has much more significant spending on streaming than the other services. It has a well-developed international distribution and programming platform, particularly localization of content as it has distribution across the globe. And it's very difficult to see how the economics of streaming work, particularly given the downdraft of the traditional business, without having a well-developed global footprint with a well-developed localization strategy as part of that. And so Netflix also is already cash flow break even, $6 billion in EBITDA over the last 12 months versus a $4 billion EBITDA loss for Disney. The fact that it has viewing across the top 10 programs in each of the key programming categories of originals, movies, and acquired programming, where when you look at the percentage of minutes watched across those lists, it's about 80% or more going to Netflix versus, say, Disney Plus at about 11%. So it is way out ahead on a bunch of measurements, and I don't think, given the burdens that traditional companies have of not only a traditional business, but heavy debt burdens as well, that they're going to be able to catch Netflix.